in marriage, there's an interaction of cultures, there's an interaction of socialization, backgrounds, and experiences. And so it is important that every person thinking of marriage or any married person considers these things before they begin to create problems. If you were raised in a home where money is a tool for getting things done, and you marry somebody who was raised in a home where money is an asset and cannot be just used, the tendency for you to clash is very high. Don't be dismissive of these things. It is important. Hello everyone, you're welcome to Unfiltered Psyche once again. Today we want to talk about something very exciting about our relationships and our marriage. The central idea is going to be for anybody preparing to get married and for our brothers and sisters who are already married. Now, we are basically talking about how our mental health and our upbringing will influence our marriage, or does influence our marriages. This is important because it's estimated that quite a number of marriages struggle, not necessarily because of existing stress, but also because of a person's background and orientation and the way they are socialized, as it were. Now, this is important because there's clear evidence to the fact that the way we are socialized and then cultured can influence our marital situations and our relationships. So, in my line of work, one of the things I've realized is that you'd find that when people are talking, they speak from their experiences. And it's interesting how our nervous system is wired that way. And so, the way a person has been spoken to, the way a person has been groomed or socialized, does have an impact on the way they also relate with other people. And then sometimes these interactions with people from their homes also impact on the way they interact with other people in their new home. So, for instance, a lot of people sometimes wonder how elderly people or grown people still succumb to the voice of their parents. Okay, it's sometimes difficult for people to understand, but there's a simple science behind it, which is that the way I speak to my son will impact his nervous system. Okay, the tone of my voice, my facial expressions will impact the way he responds. And mind you, this is happening at a time that he is now developing his emotions, his cognitions, and the rest. So his nervous system is being programmed to respond to the tone of my voice, to my facial expressions, to my mannerisms. And that's why if he should grow up, even in his adulthood, his 50s and 60s, and I'm still alive, I can still influence him in a way that will be difficult for him to explain. I could call him and speak to him in the same way I used to speak to him as a child, and he would not recognize why he's responding to me that way, but he still will respond to me that way because our nervous system never really, for want of a better word, grew. It is intact and it's resolute in that way. So it requires a lot of work for one to unlearn what has been done to their nervous system, as it were. So this cuts across every facet of our lives, where we've had experiences with people, and sometimes from a very unconscious standpoint, you may meet somebody like that, someone similar to the one you had an experience with. And if it was a positive experience, you certainly feel positive about this person. And if it was negative, you feel negative about this person. Sometimes we don't know why. So there's a way our orientation or our upbringing, our socialization, our culture influence our reactions. And that is what makes this conversation very important, because in marriage, there's an interaction of cultures, there's an interaction of socializations, there's an interaction of backgrounds and experiences. And so it is important that every prospective person or any person thinking of marriage or any married person considers these things before they begin to create problems. So, for example, if you were raised in a home where money is a tool money is a tool for getting things done, and you marry somebody who was raised in a home where money is an asset and cannot be just used, the tendency for you to clash is very high, because when you make money, because you possibly were raised in a home where money is a tool, you are likely to use the money you make to take care of things that are important to you. Someone may call it extravagance. You may not see it that way. It is just you using the money as a tool to make your life comfortable and more meaningful. And if you are in a marriage with somebody who was raised to see money as an asset, it is something that must be preserved. It must be made and stored. Then for a rainy day, as it were, then chances are you will make a lot of money and may not necessarily want to spend. And your spouse or your beloved, whoever it is, may then wonder why you are working so hard and making all the money, and that can spark something. Now, what makes that even more critical, difficult, is that now, because this is not just knowledge, this is something engraved in our nervous system, then that's where the problem is. That's where it becomes a whole difficult thing to deal with, because logically, one may recognize that, oh, I have this money and I must use it to buy this. But then it is engraved in the person's nerves that buying things is a sign of irresponsibility, and they cannot let that go. So the point I'm making is that in marriage, we need to understand the very things which have been planted into our nervous system, the very things which have written or wired our nervous system. And we need to be aware that for us to succeed living together as people from different backgrounds, we need to bring these wirings to the table and be conscious about undoing them, else we will clash and not have a reason for clashing. And sometimes it almost becomes as though we are fighting over nothing in particular. So a few things for us to be mindful of is that first of all, if you are raised in a home where you have to seek permission to talk, okay, you would have to be mindful of the fact that if you are interacting with other people, you are likely to be extremely respectful. You are likely to be sensitive to people who just air their opinion. You are likely to be triggered by them when they are talking, because you might feel that they are attacking you, they are speaking down on you, when they probably may just be airing their opinion. And so recognize that if you were raised in a home where you had to ask permission, go through an aunt and uncle before you talk to your father or your mother, that is a wiring, and that is something you need to be mindful of, because it's going to impact the way you communicate with your spouse and the way you receive the communication or communication from your spouse. So that's one. If you're raised in a home where there are no clear boundaries, okay, anybody can enter the other person's room, take whatever they want, and then if the other person should ever complain, it's going to be, oh, forget about it, and we all move on. That can also influence your interaction with your spouse if they were raised in a different home where everything is orderly, everybody has their thing, and everybody keeps their stuff. Now, simple and almost unnecessary as or little as these experiences may be, they may actually be the reason for which one may struggle with their spouse. The other one is that if you are raised in a home where there's absence, now a lot of people consider absence as maybe a mom not being there or stuff like that. But sometimes absence is the person is there, but you cannot talk to the person at will. And there are other times where the person is not there at all. Now, anything that suggests that there's a boundary between you and that significant person, you wish you could. And this significant person, let's bear in mind, is somebody who is supposed to provide, protect, and give you a sense of worth. If you don't have clear access to a person like that, that can wire you in a certain way. Now, that can make you avoidant. So your nervous system masters how to stay with yourself, how not to talk about situations, how to process things all by yourself and deal with life all by yourself. And this can also have an impact on you Now, two-way impact. The first impact is that you may not feel comfortable talking about deep things. That's a one-way impact. The other path is that you may also have this longing to share your experiences with that person who chooses to be a spouse to you. And so you may be extreme in both ways, and you need to be mindful of that, where you sometimes want to pass everything on to this other person you are dating because that's something you didn't really get. And then also the way you feel that, oh, this is my information, don't keep yours and let me keep mine. Either ways, it can create problems, because marriage is about finding middle ground, but our experiences can make us always be at either sides of the table. So that is something we need to bear in mind. Now, again, if you're raised in a home where you have to always be looked out for, like somebody doesn't think you'll be fine all by yourself, so you sometimes become very, very clingy, you sort of always need the approval of somebody. So these are subtle things, and then there are other things which may also impact us, like the abuses. If you are physically abused or emotionally abused or verbally abused, that these are also things that may impact marriage. The point I'm making is that we may not know, or we cannot mention the 1,001 things that can impact your marital situation, but there's that clear evidence, okay? And this is where we all need to be mindful of. When you notice that you act in ways that make it difficult for your spouse to engage you, especially when your spouse presents something to you in that way, like, oh, sometimes I want to talk to you, but you are distant, or sometimes I feel insecure because you don't tell me anything, or sometimes I wonder why you lash out on me at the least thing. Now, like I said, you cannot determine what caused all of this, but don't be dismissive of these things. It is important, and this is where I want to put the icing on the cake. If you do not receive feedback from the person you love, it's a sign that there's a crack somewhere that needs fixing. If you receive feedback with defensiveness, say the person is trying to give you feedback and it's like, but you too, what about you? That is defensiveness. Once you present yourself that way, it means that there's a crack somewhere. If you break down when you are being given feedback, like when the feedback is coming, you are crying and crying and crying, it's a sign that there's something somewhere, there's a crack somewhere. If you shut in when you are being given feedback, so for sometimes your spouse is trying to tell you something and you don't want to hear it, you're on your phone or you are walking away, it's a sign that there's something somewhere. So one of the clear signs that there's something in your nerves which needs awareness, which needs working on, is the way you receive feedback. If you cannot receive feedback with openness of heart, if you feel attacked all the time, then there's a sign that there's something somewhere. So the capacity to receive feedback is one of the signs of the way our nervous system is actually structured. So I hope this is useful. And mind you, as you're receiving feedback from people, ask yourself, because there are also those who receive feedback without judgment, and that is also a sign that there's something. So if you receive feedback hook, line, and sinker, it becomes your belief system. So someone says something, you find it difficult to reflect on it and say, okay, but I don't think I do this, can you explain this one? It's like, oh, once this person has said it, that is it. It's also a sign that there's a crack somewhere. So these ways of receiving feedback are evidences to the fact that there's something that needs working on, and let's be open to working on these things. Let's be open to working on these things with an open heart, because without working on these things, and particularly being deliberate at it, we will struggle with things we shouldn't be struggling with. Now, this is why I recommend two things for you. Number one is that make sure that if you don't believe the feedback, if you're struggling with the feedback, make sure you talk to a professional. And I will always recommend talking to a professional. Talk to a professional and get some insight into the situation. The other one is that I want to recommend to you, if you've experienced some of these things I've mentioned, like sometimes you feel angry, you can't take feedback, it makes you break down, I want to recommend Joyce Meyer to you. Please go and listen to Joyce Meyer. Listen to her videos, listen to her sermons, read her books, and gain insight into how these things play out in our lives.